for your clear word again. We invite your Spirit in, Lord, to guide us and to remove these scales from our eyes. And I pray for great understanding, Lord, with this message. I pray that you would bless and anoint my lips, that I may speak to your people in a way that they understand it and that they get it. And I pray that you would grant me great ability to share this topic. I thank you, Lord, for blessing us and being here with us. In Jesus' name, amen. When we look at a diet, the definition of it should be that it promotes overall good health, and it promotes weight loss or maintenance naturally, and it allows us to eat until we are satisfied, and it is healthy enough to be maintained for life. There are so many other fad diets out there that do not fit testing. I think I may have accidentally turned it. There are a good number of diets out there that do not meet this criteria. We went through many of those on the talk called Satan's War on Fruit. The high meat diet, if you look at at least it used to be on the Atkins diet, it used to say not to be used more than 2 weeks. That is the high meat diet. That is because the research is so incredibly clear that it causes heart disease, kidney disease, high cholesterol, hypertension, all sorts of chronic diseases, and it should not be used for very long. The warning was 2 weeks. I don't know if that warning is still on there. These are the diabetes statistics in Kenya. There's a population of 28.8 million between 20 and 79 years old, with a 4% prevalence, or 1.12 million adult cases in 2021. The worldwide cases have doubled in 20 years. The gross domestic product on healthcare spending was 4.33%. The estimate is about 400,000 to 450,000 of adults that are undiagnosed with diabetes. It's considered to be a silent disease for many until they're more advanced, when they start to actually get symptoms. The cost of diabetes is 74.521 million Kenyan shekels. Those without complications, it's over 21 million. With complications, it's over 42 million. And it's projected to rise in 2045 to 177 billion. Of all the amputations that are done here in Kenya, 25 to 56% of them are all due to diabetes. And I say, if this is our statistics, after having the worldwide diabetes associations and diabetes associations of all these different countries, and it's continuing to look like this, I say that we need to have a fresh approach. Obviously, something that they are doing or something they're teaching is not working. And maybe they need to go back to the drawing board and have a relook at what isn't working and what is. The research is incredibly clear. There is no question about what the research says. It is so clear that showing that a whole food plant-based diet improves diabetes and reverses it and prevents it all together, because the cause is in the cure, or the cure is in the cause. We see that the increased risk factors for diabetes is a lack of natural fiber in the diet. That's generally the first issue. It's not really even the meat issue, it is actually the fiber issue. So it's a lack of fruits and vegetables mainly, because if we are having plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables uncooked, then those calories displace other things that we might be eating, such as meat and dairy and sugar and processed foods and eggs. It might displace those. If we are eating like 5 servings of fruits a day and 5 servings of vegetables a day, those calories are taken from somewhere. And they're usually from the animal products, or they're from processed foods. And on the opposite is true too. If we aren't eating enough fresh fruits and vegetables, that means that those calories that we're not getting are being displaced by the animal products and the processed foods. Does that make sense? The key finding here is more fiber. It's actually not even going vegetarian or vegan. The key is more fiber. When we look at least when I look at God's healthcare system counts fiber. Satan's sick care system counts protein. And how many of us are constantly worried about how much protein am I getting? If you're on a vegan diet, where do you get your protein? Or if you're on a raw Nebuchadnezzar diet, where are you getting your protein? You see, Satan will do anything that he can in order to divert our attention away from God's true foods. And that is the foundation, are raw fruits and vegetables. And Kenyans, I found out, are not really that good at eating large salads or any salads at all. And when you do eat greens, they're usually cooked quite a bit. And I've yet to really see giant salads on your potluck line. Is that probably pretty accurate? Yeah. And so when we start counting fiber now, everything changes. We don't need to count protein. Did you know that protein is in everything? It's in all of our natural fruits and vegetables. There is protein, or at least amino acids. All amino acids are in all fruit. We talked about that the night that we talked about Satan's war on fruit. If you weren't here for that or didn't watch it, go back and listen to that. All amino acids are in all fruits, and we don't need to worry. If we are getting enough protein, enough calories, we already are getting enough protein. We don't need to worry. Generally, women need about 35 to 45 grams a day. Men need generally around 45 to 55 grams per day. The need does not change based upon weight. If someone is obese, it doesn't mean that they need 20 more grams of protein. It is a constant number. Generally, between 10 and 15% of our diet is all that we need. We can even get by on 8% quite healthfully if we are eating the right foods and we're getting enough calories. And what I mean by the right foods is if we are eating, for example, a Nebuchadnezzar diet, which is very high in fruit and greens, our protein may be 8, 9, 10 to 15%, and that's actually all that we need. We don't need any more than that. But yet we've become a culture who has listened to the marketing and media and the advertisers and the magazines that we need more meat. we need more protein. We actually don't need more protein. That is Satan's war on fruit. That is Satan's sick care system is counting protein. God's health care system is counting fiber. One of the biggest increased risk for diabetes then is a lack of true whole food fibers in the form of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans. And our minimum goal, according to the standards of most governments, are about 35 grams, 25 to 35 grams in that range. But when we are eating a diet that is high in fruits and vegetables, our fiber intake actually can easily go up to 50. And if we add beans to that, we can easily get up to 75 to 100. It doesn't take much to get there if we are eating fruits and vegetables and beans, and then even nuts and seeds have a good amount of protein in them or amino acids. We don't have to worry about getting enough. We will get enough as long as we're getting enough calories. I generally recommend people to start out with 35 when they're first starting out. And once they reach 35, now the next goal is to get to 50. And then they should maintain a minimum of 50 from there on out. And the more, the better. Because the more fiber that we're getting, it means the more plant foods that we're getting. Now, to get up to 100, it's very difficult on the Nebuchadnezzar diet, but we can easily get there on the Daniel diet with beans. An increased risk factor number 2 is a high-fat diet. I went over that on Satan's war on fruit, and I'm going to go over it again briefly in one of the slides coming up again. It's because of the animal products, how it gets into the insulin receptor site. And animal products are the highest insulin producing food there is. But yet, we're never told that. We are never taught that. It produces more insulin than sugar, than fruit, than anything. It's animal products. Sedentary lifestyle is number 3. That's because we become a world that we are addicted to our television and to our screens, and even moderate activity reduces our risk. Just getting out a little bit, anytime that we can get away from our screen, anytime that we can get away from television and stop sitting, even studying, the better. Overweight as well. I'm going to explain the physiology of how all of this happens in one of the future slides here. But we want to have a diet where weight loss is natural and that we aren't constantly starving and wondering when our next meal is coming. And then another increased risk factor is not drinking enough water. Okay, so here's that slide. We have on the far right, the gray cell here. That's just a regular cell, and every cell has multiple insulin receptor sites on it. This is you see the red square. That is the insulin receptor site. And then you see the insulin, which is the red square with legs and arms on it, and it's grabbing the glucose. The insulin unlocks the door, puts the key in, because the insulin is the key. It unlocks the door, it opens the door, and now it throws the glucose in, and the glucose in the blood now starts to go down. Our insulin receptor sites are on all of our muscle cells and on our liver, our fat cells, everywhere. And so the body has, the pancreas has taste testers that it tastes multiple times a second the sweetness of the blood. And the faster that it rises, the faster the pancreas starts to produce more insulin. The slower that it rises, the slower the insulin is produced out of the pancreas. The muscle cells can only hold so much. When our muscle cells get full, it locks the door and says, I'm not taking any more. The insulin now goes to the liver and says, hello, I need a place to put all of this sugar because the blood sugar is going up. And the liver says, sure, come on in. Just unlock the door, bring in whatever sugar you need, and have at it. So the insulin does that, but then the liver is like, whoa, I didn't know you needed, you had this much sugar. I can only fit so much. This is like way over capacity. And so I've got to close my doors, and it slams the door. But yet the blood sugar continues to rise up. And now the insulin goes to the fat cells. And the fat cells are very resistant to taking in glucose. It doesn't want to, because our bodies don't want to have excess weight. It wants to be of a normal weight. But the insulin now, the pancreas sees that the glucose continues to rise, and now the pancreas is panicked and saying, I've got to get this blood sugar down. All the muscle cells are full, all the liver cells are full, no one's taking any more, and the liver cells the fat cells are resistant. That means that I need to produce more insulin in order to bust down those doors. If my door to my house is locked and I forgot my key and I need to bust down my door, I may not be able to do it by myself. But if I have 6 or 7 other friends with me and we all bang against that door eventually will go down, right? That's what happens in the fat cells. Eventually there's going to be so much insulin at every single insulin receptor site that it will bust down the door and force the fat cells to take in glucose. It doesn't want to take in that glucose, but it has to. Now, as you see from the lower left, the squishy circular fat cells with the normal insulin receptor door, now as I start to gain weight, or my fat cells start to gain weight, I start to gain weight, and you see that now the insulin receptor site actually changes shape. That's because if I have a deflated balloon and I put with a black magic marker a smiley face on it, and now I blow up the balloon, it's not going to look the same anymore. It's going to be distorted. The insulin receptor site on the fat cell changes shape because the shape of the fat cell actually changes. And now you see that the insulin can no longer even get in there because now it's a totally different shape. And now we're getting insulin resistance because of excess weight. Another way that we get insulin resistance is through fat. And even if we are of normal weight, we can actually give somebody who is not insulin resistant, they do not have diabetes or any problems with their blood sugars, we can give them diabetes or insulin resistance in 2 weeks. There's wonderful studies that are done out there, and one of the first ones that I saw from years ago was when they took medical students, male medical students, and they tested their blood prior. No one had diabetes, no one had insulin resistance, nothing like that. They were all totally young, healthy men, and within 2 weeks of putting them on a high-fat diet, they were able to give them diabetes, insulin resistance. What happens is the insulin receptor site, because of the saturated fat and the cholesterol, it actually clogs the insulin receptor site. There's still nothing wrong with the key. You notice that the key does not change. There's nothing wrong with the key anywhere in this process at any time. Now we're talking about type 1, I'm not talking about type 1 diabetes, that's a little bit different. It's basically the same, but it is a little bit different, but I'm talking about type 2 here. When I say we have a gate on our property. When in the winter time, it gets above freezing during the day and it will rain. By night, it goes to freezing and our lock on our gate now gets frozen, and there's nothing wrong with my gate key, but when I'm trying to put my key into the gate lock, it's frozen. My key is still the same. The problem is the lock itself. It's the same thing with the insulin receptor site. It's still the same key, it's still the same insulin receptor site, but it's clogged. And it's clogged not with frozen water, but it's clogged with saturated fat and cholesterol, which mainly comes from animal products. From meat, dairy, eggs, fish, chicken, anything. Because of that type of fat. It clogs it. Those are two different ways that it creates insulin resistance, and that's why meat is the most powerful insulin producer. Because the meat clogs the insulin receptor site, and now the pancreas has to produce more insulin because the blood sugars are remaining high. The blood sugars have nowhere to go. The pancreas just starts billowing out more and more insulin in a panic, thinking that as long as I have 10 or 15 insulin at every single insulin receptor site, eventually we're going to break down that door. Eventually it does. And that's why the medical system injects insulin into people. It's craziness. There's nothing wrong with the key. There's nothing wrong with the insulin. You see how it's dietary related? In both of those cases of insulin resistance, it's excess weight and animal products both cause insulin resistance. If those are the cause, then the treatment is the removal of those things. And that's how, when we go back, what is the proper diet? It's one that we must maintain healthfully for life and will not be disease promoting, but health promoting. When I have more insulin now being produced in my body, whether it's from my pancreas or whether I'm injecting it, the side effect is gain weight. I gain weight as more insulin is being produced in my body, or I inject it. And then because I now gain weight, I gain more insulin resistance. Now my body has to produce more insulin, which creates me more weight, which creates more insulin, which recreates more weight. You see, it's just this never-ending cycle of abuse on the body. We need to stop that cycle. And we stop the cycle by, one, removing the poison, the saturated fat, and the cholesterol. And so we remove, at the same time we replace it back now with fiber, natural fiber, mainly in the form of raw fruits and vegetables and even beans. Those are the three most powerful fiber foods that we can add for people with diabetes to reverse it in no time. I'll show you in a little bit about if you were not here during Satan's War on Fruit, I will quickly go over some results that I had at my program in my home sanitarium. But as soon as I now start eating a high fiber diet, that fiber gets into the insulin receptor site. It removes all that clogging. It removes that fat and that muck and that gunk. And now the insulin can get into the insulin receptor site properly. And now I'm not being starved to death and constantly hungry, because my cells can actually be fed now. Because when my insulin receptor sites are clogged, I'm not absorbing what I'm supposed to. So now I become malnourished. and my protein starts to leak out of my urine. I am not absorbing the way that I'm supposed to, and now I start getting other symptoms, and now I start getting side effects. And now I don't have circulation to my feet. I don't get circulation to my brain. I start having memory problems. I start having poor circulation to my feet, and now I have to have my toes chopped off. And as soon as you have one part chopped off, it just doesn't end. It's a very, very sad process. And it is so sad because this process can be reversed in like 2 weeks, in less than 2 weeks, by this process right here. And then as we are eating foods that take out the muck and the gunk out of the insulin receptor sites, now our cells are taking in the nourishment, and the fiber has less calories in it, but it fills us up faster, more efficiently, and now I'm not taking in as many calories, and now I start to reduce on my weight, and on the lower right, my fat cells can now start losing weight, and I start losing weight, and now it's a downward spiral to healing. This is Satan's war on fruit, because if I am eating a high-fat diet with the saturated fat with animal products, and I have fruit, yes, my blood sugars do go up. That is true. But that's just like, it's only half truth and half lie, because God said, eat of all of these trees, but don't eat of that one in the midst. And then Satan says in Genesis 3:1, well, didn't God say that you could eat of every tree? Well, yes, God did. But part B is God said, well, you also can't eat of that one. And that's the same thing that's happening here. So yes, my blood sugars will go up if I am eating a high animal fat diet, if I'm eating fruit. That's why they say don't eat fruit. It makes sense, but it's only half truth and half lie. And this process, the way that they treat it, can never be reversed. You will continue to walk towards disease until you lose your brain through a stroke, or you lose your leg through an amputation, or your sight, or you start losing your kidney function, and all of these long-term processes, because it's a half-truth. This is God's health care system, not Satan's sick care system. When we look at the prevention and or reversal of diabetes and all chronic diseases, learn to count fiber and fat, not carbs and protein. And even the associations, the diabetes associations, tell people to count carbohydrates. I don't have people count carbohydrates. I teach people to count fiber, because that's what matters. And that's in natural foods. I'm not talking about supplements. And then we don't have to weigh and measure our food either. I never teach people to weigh and measure their food. I used to be a certified diabetes educator, so I'm well qualified to give this talk. When I was living in the States, when I moved to Canada, I gave it up after 15 years because I didn't feel like I needed that certification anymore. I want to share that a carb's not a carb, a fat is not a fat, and a protein is not a protein. What does that mean? It means that a Twinkie is not, or candy is not the same as fruit. Not even the same. The media wants you to believe it's the same. The grocery stores and the food companies want you to believe it's the same, but it's not true. It doesn't even make sense that candy is going to act the same in our body as an apple or a mango or a banana. Does that even make sense? Does that even register in your mind that they actually act the same? It's because they both have simple sugars. And they do have simple sugars, and we're going right back to Satan's lie again. It's half truth and half lie. A fat is not a fat because an avocado and nuts and seeds and olives, they do not act the same in the body as animal fat, not the same at all. And a protein is not a protein, meaning that the protein that are beans and nuts and seeds are not the same as the protein that comes from animals. Totally different. We have a food system that doesn't care about our health, and we have a healthcare system that doesn't care about our food. We must learn to think differently and more critically and start to believe in God more. And if he says that something is healthy and we're supposed to eat a certain way, let us trust him. Let us not trust the media. And I don't care what the researchers say. I don't care what the doctors say. God trumps it all. We eat for prevention, eat whole food plants whole, and cut down on the processed foods. We want to cut out the majority of our dairy and animal products and all of our processed carbs. And we want to lose weight naturally and sustainably. That should not be the goal, though. I never teach, if someone wants to come to me and their goal is weight loss and that's it, I will do my very best to make their goal health. And if I can't change their idea on health instead of weight loss, I'm not even going to bother, because they're just going to waste their money seeing me. Because as soon as they lose their weight, then they're just going to go back to their old eating habits again. So I want to teach people how to have true health. And if they are going to have health as their foundation and their motivation, then weight loss is a natural side effect now. So I try to teach people to think differently. Also, drinking 4 liters of water a day. That is, I teach people to chug your first liter first thing in the morning, and then your next 3 liters would be throughout the day away from your meals. Use Chronometer app. It's free. You can download that, and it's an app that shows you how many calories, how many protein, fat, your percentage, or grams, or however you have the settings. It's a wonderful app to learn about the food that you're eating. And if you set to learn about it and you put your food in there and use this as an exercise for only 2 weeks, then you will learn so much about the food that you're eating. And I do recommend that. Just use it for 2 weeks. Put everything that you eat into that app and just start studying it, and you're going to be amazed at what you will learn. And then another is exercise, because muscle takes up glucose. When we exercise, in that following slide, when the glucose is trying to get into the muscles and we're not exercising, that glucose just kind of sits there and doesn't do anything. But when we're exercising, that glucose is used up in energy in order for us to exercise, and now it's ready to take in more glucose. So if we're just sitting around all the time, then we want to stop, not eat so much. This is a major problem around the world, not just here in Kenya or North America. This is a major problem with all of our diseases. It's processed foods. Processed foods, along with the meat and the dairy and the eggs and these processed carbohydrates, we're really good at making God's health food into calorie bombs. So we take onions and make them into onion rings. We have 1 medium onion, which is 88 calories and 4 grams of fiber. We have 8 ounces of onion rings, and that turns it into 600 calories with no fiber. If we take oranges into orange juice, 1 5.5 ounce juice is 65 calories with 7 grams of fiber. And if we have 1 cup of, that was an orange. And if we have 1 cup of orange juice, it's 104 calories with a half a gram of fiber. When we take olives to olive oil, if we take 5 Spanish green olives, it's 25 calories with a half a gram of fiber. Or 1 tablespoon of olive oil is 120 calories with no fiber. The definition of food is that it must have 3 components. It must have carbohydrates, protein, and fat, and then the 4th is a non-nutrient, and that is fiber. Oil does not fit that category. All oil is inflammatory. For those of you who think that coconut oil or extra virgin olive oil is non-inflammatory, that's because of marketing. It's not because of true research. You may see research that shows it's non-inflammatory, but when you look carefully, follow the money trail first. Who are the authors? Who's paying them? And then second of all, what are they studying? What are they comparing it to? Are they comparing it from one oil to another? And that's where you probably believe that this is true. But when you look at comparing somebody who is on a diet that is comparable, one group has X diet and the other group has X diet, and the only difference between them is the oil that, or the fat that they're eating. One group has olive oil or any kind of processed oil, and the other one has a natural fat such as avocado or nuts or seeds. Otherwise, the rest of the diet is completely the same. That's where we see that all oil is inflammatory. There is no health value in oil. And it's this is probably quite a shock to some people, because I know you Kenyans are really good at putting oil like in everything. I haven't had oil in like 30 years. There's no need to use oil at all for anything. Well, except if you have a waffle iron. I have destroyed waffle irons before because I don't oil them, because I've tried to get away from it with my waffle irons. And I've tried different things to not use oil, and it doesn't work. So I do spray some oil on my waffle iron, but that's it. I use no oil at all. It's not necessary. And when we learn to start using herbs and our thyme and our basil, rosemary, sage, cilantro, parsley. Once we start to learn how to use some of these things, then we don't need the oil. And it's just so unnecessary. It's actually not a real food. We can look at corn to corn oil. Half a cup of fresh corn is 89 calories with 4.5 grams of fiber. 1 tablespoon of corn oil is 120 calories with no fiber. It takes 12 to 15 ears of corn to equal 1 tablespoon of corn oil. And then 8 ounces of Frito corn chips is 1,200 calories with no fiber. The incredible growing apple. 1 apple has 80 calories, 5 grams of fiber. 1 cup of apple sauce with sugar is 160 calories with 2 grams of fiber. 1 cup of apple juice, 115 calories, no fiber. 1 slice of apple pie, 310 calories with half a gram of fiber. And apple pie a la mode, which is apple pie with a scoop of ice cream, 583 calories with a half a gram of fiber. We can see that as we start to process these foods down more and more, their calories go up and their fiber goes down. Are you starting to see the pattern? This is an interesting thing. In North America, we have a place, it's a box store that it's a giant store where people get really good prices for buying their food. It's called Costco. And one of their sugar-free muffins, which is 9 ounces, has 720 calories and 1 gram of fiber. Let me make a point here of what this means. I could either have that one muffin, or I can have all of these other things in the corner. I can have 1 2-pound pineapple. I can have a half a cantaloupe, a half a kiwi, a half of a papaya, 5 ounces of grapes, 2 pears, and 2.5 large pieces of oatmeal bread. And I still come up to 720 calories and 30 grams of fiber. You see where the fiber now is becoming important? Kind of starting to see the importance why I don't even have people count carbohydrates. They don't need to, because the more that we're counting fiber, the more it means that we're eating more whole foods, eaten whole. I've kind of toned this down now to Kenya. So these are more calories. These are all 720 calorie examples. Low nutrients, low fiber, high calorie, very dense. 2 large chapatis, which are have refined wheat flour and oil, 3 grams of fiber, 720 calories. So would you rather have 2 large chapatis, or are you going to be more satisfied and full on all of those things in the corner? Most of the time, we will not even be able to finish all of that. I eat a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables, but I can't even eat all that. So I would much rather have this, because I'm not going to get very full on 1 sugar-free muffin, and I'm going to be hungry quite quickly. And just by 2 chapatis, I'm going to be hungry again. Or you can have 3 medium deep-fried, how do you pronounce that? Mandazis. I had to look what that was. 1.5 grams of fiber, 720 calories. 500 milliliters of soda and 4 slices of white bread is 720 calories with only 3 grams of fiber. The deep-fried potato chips or potatoes and 0 to 4 grams of fiber. If you have it peeled, it's 0. If you keep all of your fiber on, your peels on, you can get up to 4. 1 cup of cooked rice and 1 cup of beef stew is 0.3 grams of fiber. A sausage and chips, which is a street food combo, 3 grams of fiber. 3 pieces of samosas, 1.5 grams of fiber. 4 pieces of white bread with 1 tablespoon of peanut butter and 2 tablespoons of jam is about 4 grams of fiber. And those are all 720 calories, each one of those lines. So are you going to be more full and more satisfied off of one of those lines? Or are you going to be more satisfied with even having extra food with all those fruits and the bread there in the bottom? Foods that have no fiber, so these are going to be the processed foods. Rice, ugali, as long as it's not the whole corn. This is the processed. White bread, white flour, meat, processed meats, dairy, including the milk and the cheese and the eggs and the sugar, the oil, fake meats. If you do see fiber in these fake meats or in these processed foods, it's many times wood pulp. It's not even true food. It's wood pulp. Soda, candy, white pasta, crackers, biscuits, potatoes without skin, butter and margarine, and most processed foods. No fiber. And yet, that is what most of us are eating all the time. And no wonder that we are having so many problems. If you're trying to keep your weight down, it's a good idea to keep your fiber intake up. In your mouth, fiber-rich foods are bulky and take more time to eat. In your intestines, they bind to fat and interfere with its absorption. By satisfying your appetite with fewer calories and less fat, fiber helps fill you up, but not out. Folks who eat high-fiber diets weigh significantly less than those who don't, and they're less likely to gain weight with age. And that is from the American Diabetes Association. I'd like to show you what a non-drug approach looks like for people with diabetes in a 10-day home program from my place. Someone wearing a continuous glucose monitor. She came to me with blood sugars in the 18s. This is 1 week later, and she's already down to 11.6. 40% of her glucoses are in range, 24% very high, 36% high, and 1% very low. And notice in the top left corner, that's from November 20th, just from this past year. And the blue bubble says 30 up there. So that's the average her glucoses have been over the last 30 days, and she spent 7 days at my house. So 3 weeks before she came, plus 1 week at my house. The next one to the right, you'll see is the blue bubble again. It says 14. That means that this is the average of the last 14 days, 7 days at my house. It's still the same date, November 20th. And her blood sugars over 2 weeks now have already come down to 10.5 with a standard deviation of 2.7. Her blood sugars are now 58% in range, 11% very high, 31% high, and no lows and no very lows anymore. Now I said, show me what your blood sugars have been doing over the last 7 days at my house. It's still the same date, November 20th, 8.6, 1.9 standard deviation. Over 7 days, 91% of her blood sugars are now in range. And then I said, okay, show me what your blood sugars have been doing over the last 2 days. She spent 7 days at my house. It's still November 20th. The last 2 days, her blood sugar 8.6. Her standard deviation has even come down to 1.2, 98% in range. Now the next day, I said, so this is November 21st, and I said, show me what your blood sugars have been doing today and yesterday. And now she's come down to 7.7 on average, and 100% of her glucoses are in range. That's what health reform does. That's someone who came to me with so out of control diabetes. She was on 150 units of insulin a day when she came to me. By the time she left, she was on less than 10 a day. And that's her results. That's high fruit. Because I asked her, what are your fears for food? And she said, fruit and potatoes. And she said, well, what's for meals? And I said, fruit and potatoes. Because whatever she would have said, I wanted her to tackle her fears right there in my presence, so I could help guide her. And she saw that potatoes and fruit are not the problem. Though we have been lied to, we've been given a bill of goods, and we have accepted that lie. What was my program? High fruit, elimination of all animal products and all processed carbohydrates, giant salads and vegetables, exercise, water, and a juice detox. One lady lost 8 pounds. Nobody was ever hungry, and this lady especially was very skeptical. Some of the other benefits that came out of this particular program, there was a lady who came in with gout so bad she was completely bedridden. Me and 2 other men had to carry her into the house. All physically looked younger and happier, all lost weight, all had fatigue that had greatly improved. One person that I said was carried in, and on day 7, she got out of her wheelchair and was walking with her walker, walking with assistance. She came in completely bed rest, and her husband was going to put her into a nursing home because he could not take care of her anymore. 7 days later, she's walking with assistance. 6 weeks later, her daughter-in-law sends me a video, which I showed you guys on Satan's War on Fruit, so you can go back and watch that. And I got a video of her walking for the first time 6 weeks later on the program, unassisted, walking on her own now. That's amazing, you know, what God's health program can do. I'm giving you all my secrets for what I do. So one smoker stopped smoking with no cravings, all became physically stronger. One lady came in with horrible PMS and bloating and moodiness and depression, and it didn't happen this time. Her depression was lifted, and a few were so weak that they didn't even have enough energy to speak. I had to get my ear right to their mouth because they didn't even have enough energy to talk out loud to where I could even hear them. And for all of them, their posture improved. This is the Mediterranean diet versus the low-fat vegan diet. you'll see that the green is the vegan. There's a washout period of a month, and then the red is the Mediterranean diet. And the Mediterranean diet, people have a tendency to think that's the gold standard. That's not the gold standard anymore. The whole food, plant-based vegan diet is the gold standard now. So we see that both times that the people were on a vegan diet, we see that they started up high, and we see that they go down low. And we see that the Mediterranean just kind of maintains itself. Then people always say to me, well, a whole food plant-based diet is more expensive. My guess is it might be the same as here. I don't know because I haven't done the research, but at least in North America, that food prices are just astronomically getting high. And the research shows, though, that the cost of groceries remains stubbornly high. Consumers should swap the meat and dairy products for a low-fat vegan diet based upon fruits, vegetables, grains, and beans to save more than $650 US a year on their grocery bill compared to a standard American diet, and more than $870 US compared to the Mediterranean diet. And the total food cost per day decreased in the vegan group by approximately 16%. Where there's a will, there's a way. I don't know if this applies to Kenya, but I have a feeling it does. I'm sure that the cost of meat has gone up and is very expensive, and dairy and eggs have gone up and they're very expensive now, just like in Canada and the US, and it's almost becoming unsustainable to eat like that. And it's becoming cheaper to eat a whole food plant-based diet. I give a whole hour talk on how to go plant-based on a budget. I don't have time to talk about that today, but where there's a will, there's a way. God doesn't hold us unaccountable just because we're poor, just because we live in the city, or we don't have a garden. He lets nobody off the hooks. We're all on the hook, and we all have to find a way to work with the Lord in our circumstance and work with Him, and He will make it possible. It may not be possible overnight, and most people it's not even possible overnight, but He will lead you along little by little by little. He'll guide you just like He's guided me. So what are the 3 key points to take away? A whole food plant-based diet is the key to reversal and prevention. I recommend 5 servings of fruits each day and 5 servings of vegetables each day, and that includes a large serving bowl size of fresh raw salad. I asked somebody once not too long ago, why don't Kenyans eat salads? And he said, I don't know, no one's ever told us it's healthy. So I'm giving you permission now to eat salads. They are the number 2 most important food in the food guide pyramid. The number 1 is fruit, number 2 are greens. We don't need anything else on that food guide pyramid. We don't need the other vegetables, we don't need the beans, and we only need a splash of nuts and seeds. But we do need the fruit and we need the greens. We add whole grains and beans, though, as in the Daniel diet. We want to keep our fat to 10 to 20%, closer to the 10 to 15%, no more than 20. The recommendations by most governments are 30%. That's disease promoting. It's way too high fat of calories for fat. Restrict our processed carbs, if not get rid of them altogether, as well as all other processed foods. Restrict or remove animal flesh, dairy, and eggs. Strengthen our